Welcome to Amplifying Leadership, a podcast where we talk leadership and all that goes with it, with our guest stories, wins, tips, and even challenges. My name is Tara and I am a partner, coach, and consultant at Twin Life Coaching and Business Services, of which Amplifying Leadership is a division. For our leadership clients, we love to support you through this podcast, coaching, training, and more as part of our leadership services. To learn more about Amplifying Leadership, please visit us at amplifyingleadership.ca. Today, I am welcoming Jennifer Redden, who works within the realm of quantum visionary leadership. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Yes, me too. Why don't we start to help our audience know what you are defining as quantum visionary leadership?
So quantum visionary leadership is really coming into a place of your own wholeness and having a regenerative and expanding capacity so you can master your unique energetic expression and create a legacy with effortless ease. And also create your own rules and create harmonious infrastructures that support the elevation and the future consciousness of humanity.
Very good. I like that. Thank you for sharing that with us. All right. Why don't we start, as I do with all of my guests, for our audience to share your leadership story? Where did you start? Where are you now within leadership?
So my leadership story started probably when I was a young girl. I remember as a very young girl having this expansive experience of knowing that I was meant to lead change and create something new for humanity. As a young girl, I remember having this profound experience of leading leaders in through this new paradigm.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's how it started. And so I was reunited with that vision just a short few years ago, but really I had a career as a respiratory therapist for 17 years. And within that career, I did multiple things. And I kept searching for more, right? I kept searching for more in the external. It was like, something's missing. I'll just keep climbing the corporate ladder. I'll keep climbing this, idea of leadership that we've created in the external. And so I did that, right? I kept searching for more. So I took on more responsibilities within my role. I was always a shift supervisor, preceptor for new hires. I was always doing something. I was always taking on extracurricular activities within my career as a respiratory therapist. And then in 2017, I believe, I became an actual formal leader, right? I got the title as a manager of the department. And so I managed 50 people at the time. And healthcare, for those of you who don't know, is a 24/7, 365 day experience, especially when you're in the acute care setting of a hospital. It is nonstop. You have to staff around the clock. You have to staff on holidays and stuff like that. And I, at the time, didn't really have a support system within our department. So it was pretty much me wearing the hat of like 5 different people. Like I was the educator, the manager. I was also a staff therapist. I was doing all of these things. So to say I was burnt out is an understatement. I was actually living the epidemic of apathy. And what I noticed is that all of my colleagues were in that same place.
That's bad.
We just didn't have this capacity to take care of ourselves, to tend to ourselves, and also lead our staff and lead the industry. So in 2019, I went on a yoga retreat, and I remember it was just, I'd been wanting to get out for a while. It just felt like my soul was dying. It was just like, I'm dying on the inside, right? So I went on this yoga retreat and I remember having this profound experience on a ski lift of it's time to get out. Like you need to get out now.
Mm-hmm.
So my last day was in January, the first week of January 2020 is when I left that career.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I knew the whole time that there had to be a better way. There had to be a better way to be a leader, to be a human. There has to be more to life than this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, little did I know that that would lead me down this journey of cultivating this deep sense of self-worth and self-belonging that really allows me to liberate myself from external circumstances. And I've come into mastering my unique energetic expression. I also embrace my natural genius. So I have this magnetic presence, all of these things. And so all of these aspects that I've garnered and gained over the last 4 years are really what has taught me how to tend to myself and also tend to my leadership that allows me to create a legacy that isn't from a place of force or pushing or proving or even this idea of like I have to make it happen. It really is from this embodied place of taking action.
And I want to go back to something you said because it is so true that there's that feel that you need to grow up that corporate ladder and that is the way to leadership and that is the way to everything everybody always wanted for people. It's that corporate ladder, as we call it, and
Mm-hmm.
getting that quote unquote title,
Right.
is so important. And, I say to a lot of my clients, titles don't matter if you're not happy, right?
Right.
Yeah. So definitely. So a little bit of self-leadership, self-reflection. Do you feel that that could help those leaders who are starting to feel how you did, like that burnout, that stuck?
Yeah, it has to go beyond self-reflection though, because I believe I've always had a level of self-awareness. I've always had this higher level of consciousness, but what I was really lacking in that space was the capacity to really know what it meant to nurture myself and not buy into other people's way of being a leader or buying
Mm-hmm.
into other people's strategy and really embracing my own innate gifts. And so it has to go beyond reflection because
Mm-hmm.
that is not going to get you to the point where you're cultivating that regenerative capacity that allows you to really create the impact that you want. You're still going to end up in those same patterns that
Mm-hmm.
creating that burnout. And what I share most of the time is that burnout itself is a living entity inside of you. Once you've experienced it once, it'll immediately come right back to the surface again. And you'll end up, I look at it as the same as like your second pregnancy, right? Your body
Mm-hmm.
immediately goes back because it's like, I know what to do
It
here.
knows.
This is
Yeah.
exactly what I'm going to do, right? And so it becomes this cellular memory of like, oh, well, this is what I do. And so you just keep repeating those patterns. So you really have to go through and clean up your capacity so you're not constantly living in this state of burnout, even if it's in some sort of state of remission.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really how burnout can kind of look like, right? You're like, oh, I've healed from it. I've moved on, but really it's just kind of hidden dormant inside of you until it's triggered again that you maybe want to take that next step, or maybe some big project happens at work or something like that. And then next thing you know, you're right back where you were maybe, a few years ago.
And I think you can see that sometimes as well when, somebody leaves a job because they feel burnout and stressed. And then they go into something almost exactly the same. So, they were managing whatever in this industry and they think switching over to this company in a different industry is going to be any different. And they end up going right back.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and that's what I found true for myself, right? I thought leaving my career of 17 years, while yes, it was the right decision,
Mm-hmm.
I thought that that would be the solution, right? That was the thing that was going to
Yeah.
save me or fix me, quote unquote. And ultimately, I had to go through the whole process of deeply healing that burnout because I was showing up in that same way and it was hurting me, and
Mm-hmm.
I got to this point where I couldn't even show up in my business because it was so against everything. I just didn't have it in me anymore. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
operate that way. It was so against every ounce of my own energetics.
Mm-hmm. And there was three words you said earlier that I want to come back to that I think are really important when people realize that they're burnt out and they need to leave and they need to figure it out, or really look into that self, which was embracing your unique gifts.
Hmm.
I love that because I think it's so important to recognize that we're all unique. And I'm saying this as an identical twin, that we're all unique. So even my sister and I, we're called mirror identical twins, meaning she's left-handed, I'm right-handed. So even as an identical twin, we have our unique gifts and we need to embrace them. And I just love that you mentioned those words. How do you see that helping leaders who are looking to go from burnt out to being productive and more and happier, I guess, in
Yeah.
whatever role they pick?
So I'm going to use this. I'm going to spill the behind the scenes beans here. You sent out a few questions, right?
Yes,
Before this call. And one of those questions I did actually sit with them. And one of the questions was about communication, right? Like
yes,
what communication do you
in
think is
leadership.
needed for a great leader, right?
Yeah.
And immediately my insides were like, we have to define a great leader for ourselves. Like
I like
so
that.
we all each have our own definition of what means, what creates, what defines a great leader. And so there's a ton of infographics out there on like, these are the things you need to be a great
Yes.
leader. And the truth is, none of us have all of those things, and we're not, and yet we all have all of those things.
Hmm.
But we have to define what that looks like for us.
Hmm.
How do we see ourselves as a great leader? What makes us a great leader without buying into somebody else's idea of what
Yes.
a great leader is? And so as I thought about that question, for you to have that as one of the questions you want to talk about, to me, that tells me that communication is a big part of your leadership,
Hmm.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so how you communicate. And so you're going to probably spend some time of what is your best mode of communication? Is it written? Is it speaking? And also for me, I look at communication, that's something that happens in the unseen. So
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
not something that necessarily, it's not always about the words that you say. It's not always about the words that you write. It's the presence that you carry no matter what you're doing.
I
So
like that.
then in that space, what you're actually creating is an embodiment of your own leadership, and you become an embodied leader. So therefore, your actions create a role model and create a ripple. And then it says to other people, oh, well, look how she's embodying these principles of who she is or who he is. That gives me permission to do the same. That gives me the
Hmm.
permission to honor my needs, to say, hey, I'm going to take some space before I give you an answer to this question, or
Hmm.
let me sit with this for a moment, or can we have this conversation at a later date? Any one of those ways, or I'm taking today because I need to tend to myself. And we don't
Yes.
necessarily need to go beyond that. But when we start doing that for ourselves, that's what creates that ripple effect of letting others lead themselves in very
Hmm.
powerful ways. So that is, to me, that's where we're heading with leadership. It's embodiment. Because really, when it comes to leadership at this point and where we're heading with leadership, we no longer tolerate or can stand or allow leaders in high positions that are those that say, do as I do as I say, don't do as I do.
Hmm.
We have to have embodied leaders that talk the talk and walk the
Walk
walk
the walk. Yeah.
every single day.
100% agree with that. I mean, to me, if someone was to define leadership, I would not include, do as I say, not as I do type people. I would call them managers or,
Right.
something else. For me, you need to lead by example by doing what everybody, and to go back to an earlier point that you briefly touched on too, is that we all have, our uniqueness about
Mhm.
us and things that perhaps, we're stronger at. And maybe Jennifer is the person who's going to be my go-to because I don't need to know everything as a leader. And I think a lot of leaders get that burnout that you're talking about, or that stress that's so great, because some of them, not all, of course, some feel like they need to be able to absolutely do everything and take it off your desk if it's not done. Oh, just give it to me type thing, where a true leader helps people grow into that. Well, what do you think you need to do, or what do you need from me, or those types of things. And I think speaking to all those things is also part of being that leader that we are, not that people perceive us as, right?
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that I wish I had more examples of in my career were somebody that would, if I came to them with a situation that I was asking for help on,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just giving me the answer or telling me what I should do, if they sat down with me and said, well, let's talk about this. Let's look at the options and then let's choose the one that feels most aligned with you,
Mm-hmm.
or the one that's going to create the greatest result, right? The most impact. And we need more leaders like that. But again, I'm going to repeat myself like a broken
That's
record.
okay.
Comes back to capacity, because if we
Yes.
don't have that capacity to do that for ourselves, we certainly don't have that capacity to do that for somebody else.
Oh, yes, agree. And it speaks to our own self-care too. We have to
Right,
start with us when we're caring about others.
right.
Because if we're not, you're right, like it's the capacity, it's that ability to help somebody else. But if we don't help ourselves first, how can it's like the plane, right? You put the oxygen mask on yourself before the children or the others that need help. Start
Yeah.
with yourself so you can help others. Yeah, I love that. I agree completely.
And that's what
Yeah.
enables us to, again, go back to your previous question of embracing our natural gifts. When someone else sees what we're good at and says, hey, I trust you to make the decision, but I also see that you may need help making that decision. So let's talk
Mm-hmm.
it out. Let's
Yeah.
create that space where you can safely move through the decisions and possibly see the results.
Mm-hmm.
And not only does that say, hey, I'm being recognized that I'm not an idiot, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I actually have this ability to make decisions. And it says that you trust me. And through all of that experience, I start to trust myself and I start to see where I can lead myself. And it
Mm-hmm.
creates that greater sense of confidence.
I was going to say confidence for sure, because, we're helping them build and grow rather than just give that to me. I'll do it. Right. Type
Right.
of attitude that we do see with lots. Let me ask you this, because we've been talking a lot about how, the leadership should start with us, obviously very important, and self-care should start with us. If you are seeing somebody who is currently burnt out and, you see them and potentially they leave just to go into the same thing, what would you say could be some things that could help them with recognizing some of this first, and then, how they can work towards becoming a better, maybe better isn't the right word, how they can be more themselves as a leader?
Yeah. So I always start with three things with my own clients, and there's still things that I do today. So again, I'm very
Awesome.
much an embodied leader myself. So I'm always my life revolves around the breath, right? Like that was my
Mm-hmm.
career for 17 years, and it's still something I do. So start with something simple. It has to be simple because you got to be able to do it on a daily basis. If we make it big and bold, we get in our heads that it has to be that way to make a big impact. But honestly, the small things that you do every day create the longer lasting impact than the big
Mm-hmm.
laborious ones you do.
Mm-hmm.
So, start with 3 times a day for 3 to 5 minutes doing what I call a breath check-in. Put your hand on your heart and one hand on your belly and feel into your breath. Let it soften you, let it calm you, let it get you out of a state of over arousal, and let it bring you back into a state of coherence. And so you can either set a timer, right, for 3 to 5 minutes if that feels good. Generally, what I do is sometimes I know for me, like if I set a timer, I'm like waiting, like when is it going to go off?
Yeah.
Right? So then you can't really settle, right? Like you're already like, especially if you're in that over arousal state, you're already, when's it going to go off? So I always say find a non-lyrical song that's really soft and soothing to you, that is around that time frame that you can put on. And then when you know that the song is done, that you know that your time is up. And so that's another really great way to set a timer for yourself. So do that 3 times a day. You can do it first thing when you wake up. You can do it before you go to bed. You could do it if you actually walk into an office. You can do it before you walk in. You can also do it before you go to the grocery store. Like
anywhere, really.
Your breath is with you everywhere you go. So it's always accessible. It's always this thing that you have to return to. So that is a great place to start. And if you're in a space and you can like write a few notes post the session, great. Take that time, what came through, how do I feel before and after, those small things. But you don't have to hold yourself to that like every single time, only when that space is there for you. The other thing that I always guide people to are what I call micro commitments. And micro commitments are, think about how you can take care of yourself, right? We've talked about self-care. We've talked about nourishment. So we're looking at the smallest ways that we can do this. And I use this example all the time. When, I had to move through multiple times in my life, I've had to move through depression, right? And so when I transitioned from one career to this career, I went through that space also. But I had learned throughout the process, there were certain things that I needed to do to, not completely fall into a complete depressed state. So I created a list, and I have a list of the things that I can do for myself on a day that I feel really good, and at the time, this was 4 years ago. So a lot has happened since then. So there are certain aspects that have changed, but back then it was like, okay, on a really good day, I can meditate and work out and, all of, and I had this long list of things that I can do to take care of myself on a really good day. And then what I did is I pulled from that list 3 things that I can do to take care of myself on my worst day.
And keep it simple.
And most people still have a hard time with what simple is. So the examples that I give are brushing my teeth, drinking water, and taking a shower. And those 3 things, if I can do those 3 things on my worst day, I know that I took care of myself. I know that I had this little moment where I really tended to what I needed and nourished myself. And it starts there. And you have to acknowledge, we take those 3 things, honestly, for the most part, granted, we don't think about those as ways that we get to take care of ourselves, right? We're like, we're supposed to shower. We're supposed to brush our teeth, right? Like, that's just a given.
But
also, right? Like, think about like a mom with a newborn baby and how difficult it is to do those 3 things. Also knowing that doing those 3 things is so pivotal in how you feel about yourself. So starting with, again, and you can choose to make one of those micro commitments, your breath check-in, right? Like you can bring over as one of those things that I know that this really supports me and says that I'm doing this thing for me, right? And again, it gets you out of this idea that self-care is big and laborious and it's about massages and it's about, spending hours journaling or hours meditating, or it makes it so small that you can put it into any part of your day.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And I think, you're right. You can put all of those into every part of your day. In fact, I've recently been working with someone who they were very stressed, burnt out, and now feeling the SAD or seasonal affective disorder because it is winter when we're recording this. So she has a morning routine, just like you said, get up, have a shower, brush teeth, and then go into her office. And she was struggling with that. And I said, okay, well, it doesn't have to be in the morning then. It just complete it that day. If that is your worst day, just complete those things.
Right.
Of your morning routine. So I put it around quotes of your morning routine throughout the day. Just right. They're completed. And then those are, so I think it's the same type of thing that you're talking about is just pick those things that work for you that, yes, I accomplished something on my worst day.
Yeah. Right? And not accomplish something in this idea of like, I've crossed a bunch of stuff off my checklist.
No, but
yeah, I just want to clarify because we can easily buy into that, like, I have accomplished something today. And it's
no, not like that.
I have accomplished taking care of myself today. I think that's that part of really understanding what nourishment means to us, right? We get to define these things. And so even taking the time to define what nourishment and what it looks like to care for myself. What does it look like to tend to myself? What does it look like to honor who I am and hold myself in a state of integrity? And so we get to start small, and slowly that smallness goes into, instead of heavily focusing on the actions, then it becomes a heavily focused state of being. And that can look like, for me, I know every day I show up in unconditional love for myself. So every day that may have a different flavor, that may look a different way. Some days that's like, I'm super productive and I got a lot done. And some days that means I spent a little bit more time in bed. Maybe I spent a little bit more time with my journal. Maybe I took more space just in general. And it's really leaning into those things. And then that becomes a state of being that takes you out of that idea of doing and accomplishing. You're actually in a state of being, and that creates that massive impact.
Yeah, wow. What a great conversation today, because, a lot of leaders, they look at that ladder that we talked about, that corporate ladder, rather than looking at themselves first. So a wonderful conversation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Yeah, it was great, and a nice perspective as well. If those listening to us today wanted to learn more about you, or perhaps more about your business, how can they find you online?
So I currently have a Substack, and it's a fairly newer platform. Some people may know about it. Everything that I do is on there. So it's expanded and embodied. And you'll have the link, I'm sure, in the show notes so people can find me. But the platform is Substack, and it's expanded and embodied on Substack. And you'll find out how to work with me. There's mastery workshops on there. There's written stuff. There's all sorts of good goodies on there that you can dive into.
Sounds like some great content to take this conversation further.
Yeah.
Thanks again for being here and sharing your insights today.
Thank you so much. This was lovely.
Thank you to our listeners, of course. We do hope that you're taking away some tips or information to help you with your leadership journey. If you are new to leadership, or even that seasoned leader who knows that support and developing your skills are the way to moving forward on your leadership journey, or you want to join our community, please visit us at amplifyingleadership.ca, a twin life coaching and business services division. Until next time, please be safe and be an amazing leader or leader to be.